Day one of the New York Giants 3-day mandatory minicamp is in the books. I have some observations, some takeaways, and a concern. That's coming up next on the LockedOn Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the LockedOn Giants podcast, part of the LockedOn podcast family, your team every day. Patricia Trainer here with you, and today's episode is brought to you in part by Blue Nile. Make your moments sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Sports listeners can get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings, and any other type of jewelry Blue Nile has to offer. Use the code LOCKEDON at checkout to get your savings. And thank you, as always, Giant fans, for making us your first listen of the day, or watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. On today's show, we're going to talk about mandatory minicamp. Day one is in the books. I have some takeaways, I have some thoughts, and I have a concern. And we're going to talk about all that on today's Locked On Giants podcast. So again, happy to have you with us. Let's get into it. All right. Busy first day at the New York Giants. And the first thing I want to talk about is something that actually I had asked Brian Daboll back in April when the Giants had a voluntary minicamp. The NFL and the CBA allows for new coaching staffs to have an extra mini camp. And so the Giants had something way back in April. They had a voluntary mini camp. And I remember asking Coach Daboll about position flexibility and were there plans to get guys involved at different positions, ask them to do things that maybe they hadn't been asked to do, maybe take away some of the roles and responsibilities that were done in the past that weren't fits. And at the time, Daboll told me, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said, that's still going to come. He said at the time, for that first mini camp, they were still learning where to go, how the flow of practice went, so on and so forth. Well, fast forward now to early June, or June 7th, which is the first day of the mandatory mini camp. And one of the things we are seeing a lot of in that practice, and we've been seeing a lot of all spring, is position flexibility. We see guys being moved around more than ever. And I'm talking about on the offensive line, where one day a guy might line up at guard, the next day he's at center, the next day he might be at tackle. I mean, they are moving guys all over the place. And then also on the defense, they are moving guys all over the place. And Dexter Lawrence actually told us that on the defense, it's being stressed that they learn all the positions so that they know not only what the guy next to them is doing, but on the defensive line, for example, they now know what to do if they are called upon to do it. So I really like this approach. And here's why I like it. The Giants are going to break on Thursday after they put their final minicamp practice into the books. At that point, Brian Daboll, his staff, General Manager Joe Schoen and his staff, they're going to sit down and they're going to say, okay, where are we right now with the state of the roster? What do we still need? What can we, where can we maybe afford to get rid of if we have excess? So it's really a good approach. They've been experimenting with different looks. They've been getting a feel for who can do what. And the coaches have been doing kind of a give and take type of situation where, they want to do certain things, but if they don't have the players or the talent to do it, maybe they scrap it, or maybe they say, you know what, this is too important to throw out of the playbook. We're going to need somebody who can do this. All right. So just the whole dynamics behind the scenes, from what I understand, is really a collaborative effort. And, I don't know if it's just for cameras or it's just a legitimate thing or it just happens naturally, but you often see Daboll and Joe Schoen walking off the practice field together, usually chatting. And I think that's so important. I think back to the last few coaching staffs, you didn't really see that a lot of times. You didn't see, the GM and the head coach walking off the field together. And it's so important that the two men are, hand in hand, step by step, attached at the hip, if you will, because that's how this team is going to get better. And that for me was really encouraging. That and the position flexibility, getting the most value out of these players. Why limit, for example, Dexter Lawrence to just being a run stuffer, and why not try him as a pass rusher? Maybe you got an extra pass rusher there, or if you have two guys that can do the same thing, well, maybe you get rid of the guy who's maybe not grasping it, and you replace him with another guy who can do something that you need on offense or defense. So I really like the way they're going about building the roster, not just in terms of guys they're bringing in, but how they're deploying them, how they're looking at them, and how they're testing them to see, what their limits are as to what they can do and what they can't do. Okay. Coming up, I'm going to talk a little bit about a concern I have. So stick around. We'll be right back. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast. But first, if you're looking for that special gift but can't decide what to get, or maybe you're just ready to pop the question to that special someone, either way, BlueNile.com has you covered. BlueNile.com has jewelry experts on hand 24/7 via phone or chat to help you find a gift within your budget range. Or if you're feeling creative and you want to design your own gift, you can go to BlueNile.com and use their online tools to create the perfect one-of-a-kind diamond ring. Whatever your occasion, make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off, $500 or more with the code Locked On. Put your faith in Blue Nile today and know that every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. So shop stress-free. Find your perfect forever piece and go to BlueNile.com today. And remember that promo code Locked On for $50 off your purchase of $500 or more. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. And before we continue onwards, we have a favor to ask you. We've put together a survey so that we can learn more about listeners like you and make your favorite Locked On podcasts even better. This is your opportunity to tell us here at the Locked On Podcast Network what you like and what you don't like about our podcasts. So please take a moment after this podcast is done, go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. The survey won't take you very long, and everybody who participates will be automatically entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. To take advantage of this survey, again, go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey. And we thank you for your help as well as your support. All right, you've got Patricia Traina here on the Locked On Giants podcast. We're recapping Giants Mandatory Minicamp Day 1, some takeaways, some concerns, just some thoughts that I had as I was putting my notes together. And I want to turn to a concern. But before I get to this concern, it's kind of going to tie together. It has to do with Daniel Jones. All right. Now, one of the questions I know I've gotten in the Twitter mailbag that I haven't been able to answer just yet was about ball security. What is Daniel Jones doing about ball security? And how has he looked in that regard? Well, I am happy to say, ladies and gentlemen, Daniel Jones, in the practices that I've been at, I haven't seen him put the ball on the ground once, either as a runner or as, dropping back to pass and having guys try to swat the ball out of his hands. So let me just set the stage for you. What the coaches have done is that when Daniel drops back to pass, they usually have, an aide or whatnot coming at him. And they're either, trying to swat the ball out of his hand, or they're putting their hands up in the passing lane, trying to do something to distract Daniel in an effort to jar the ball loose. Now, the other thing that they've been doing, and this is something I don't really remember seeing much of, actually, I don't remember seeing at all with Daniel Jones, is when he takes a handoff and he is rolling out to the left or to the right, they are taking these padded like cones, for lack of a better term, and they're swatting at him. And I have noticed that Daniel, instead of holding the ball with just one hand, like he would do, so many times, he's now holding that ball tightly with two hands up against his chest. So, ladies and gentlemen, there's hope that he has finally gotten into a habit of securing that ball, because he knows people are going to come at him. They're going to try to knock that ball out. He did get better in the turnover department last year, but it wasn't perfect. All right. There were some mishaps, but Daniel did get better as the season wore on. And you can really see in these practices, at least so far, again, there haven't been instances where he has put the ball on the ground. So that is a big, big plus and takeaway as far as Daniel Jones is concerned. Now, while I am on the topic of Daniel Jones, I have a concern. And the concern comes from a question that I think I said on the show. I don't remember when it was, but I remember saying on the show that I was going to ask if I got the opportunity. So let me play you the clip of my question and Daniel's answer so that you can hear what my concern is. Have you had an opportunity to work with a baseball coach to learn how to slide, or have you done anything differently in the offseason to protect yourself when you're out there as a runner?
I have not worked with a baseball coach. I think more than anything, that's just being aware in certain situations and making the decision to go down earlier. So I think there's things you can watch on tape and learn from it, and I'll continue to work on it.
Okay, so everybody wants to know, now that Daniel Jones has recovered and been cleared from his neck injury, what's he going to do to protect himself moving forward? And I said, okay, you know what? I remember years ago, Eli Manning worked with a baseball coach to learn how to slide and protect himself. So I figured, okay, let me ask Daniel and see if he did the same, or maybe he's doing something different to protect himself. I was very disappointed to hear that has not been the case. I was probably more disappointed to hear him say, well, I just got to watch on film and study and just do it. I'm sorry, folks. Every run, every situation is going to be different. I'm not so sure there's, that watching film ahead of, playing an opponent is going to help Daniel Jones protect himself, because every play unfolds differently. So, I don't want to criticize him too much, but I thought that was kind of a weak sauce answer. And it was very, I don't want to say disappointing, but concerning, because Daniel is hardwired to make the most of his opportunities, whether it's passing, whether it's running. And, you know me, guys, I like to be positive. I really do. But I'm not going to lie to you. I am concerned that Daniel, he's just not going to know when to say when. I hope I am wrong. Time will tell. But I just don't see how you can study ahead of time. If you're facing the Cowboys, how are you going to study ahead of time? Oh, if I run an extra 2 yards here, I'm going to make it. Whereas if I only run, 1 yard short of what I want to run, I'm going to protect myself. I just thought that answer just wasn't good enough. And I know I'm sounding critical, but I'm speaking as a concerned reporter who has seen a lot of bad football and who really doesn't want to see Daniel Jones get hurt again. So maybe, as training camp goes on and the pads come on, and the defense shows that, that aggressiveness. Now, obviously, they're not going to put the quarterback on the ground, but there will be contact when we get to training camp after the acclimation period. So maybe things will be different. I don't know. I sure hope so, because that right now is my biggest concern with Daniel Jones. Not can he run this offense that he has shown he can do, I think. Not, can he protect the ball? Like I said, I believe he can do that. He's improved in that. But can he protect himself? That's where I have my biggest concern. So time will tell. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up. Hang around. We'll be right back. All right, Giant fans, still more to come on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. But first, Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, but without the calories and without the sugar. Most Built Bars contain about 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. And you know what? They taste great. I've been having Built Bars during my time at the Giants, if I need something to hold me over until lunchtime or dinner time, I pull out a Built Bar, and boy, do they do the trick. And they taste fantastic. And right now you can get Built Bar in one of 9 amazing flavors, nut or nut free. You can get Built Puffs. You can get their limited time offerings. They have so many different options that you'll want to check out built.com every so often to see just what it is they're offering amongst their flavor lineup. And if you go on over to built.com today, you can save 15% off your first order with the code LOCKED15. Again, that code is LOCKED15, LOCKED15 for 15% off your first order at built.com. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the LockedOn Giants podcast. I am Patricia Traina, and you can read, if you wish, my full Giants minicamp report from day one on giantscountry.com. It's up there. Right now, what I'm doing on this show is I'm talking about basically concerns, takeaways, just things that really, really stood out that I felt I wanted to address on this program. I'll probably do the same thing on the date for day 2. And then for Friday, I'm hoping to do a live show. So this way, you guys and gals can ask your questions of me during a live show. I'm going to see if I can get the entertainer to come on with me so we can talk about football and whatnot and take your questions. So, all right. The last thing I want to talk about, the last takeaway, is the injury situation. Now, this is kind of interesting because, the topic of conditioning came up during Coach Daboll's presser. And, right now, the idea is to get these guys into shape. They're not in training camp shape. That's still to come. But they've been working at the off-season program since April. They're not in, they're in decent shape. So the question of conditioning came up. And it came up because I think the last OTA we were at, some of the defensive linemen ran sprints. So I asked Daboll, and let me just back up here why I asked this question. I can remember last year, the previous coaching staff was very big on conditioning. The idea was they didn't want these guys running around in the fourth quarter with their tongues hanging out on the grounds, from exhaustion. So they did a lot of extra conditioning. There were sprints. There were plans to put the hill in, the Patriot version of the hill, which, obviously have been scrapped since. There was extra conditioning. With the Giants now under Daboll, it's like practice ends. They do their stretch, their post-practice stretch, and then they go in, and I don't know what they do after that because we're not allowed in the building. So I couldn't tell you if they go off to lift weights or whatever. So I asked Daboll, keeping in mind that the Giants have been one of the most injured teams, not just last year, but for a number of straight years. I asked him specifically, what is the balance? How do you balance conditioning versus backing off and knowing when to say when? Because I felt last year that there were times when that team was run down to the nub. And when guys are that tired and that worn down, guess what? You're going to get hurt. All right. Your body doesn't have a chance to recover. You're going to get hurt. So I wanted to know basically what's Daboll planning to do about it? How are they going to do things differently? I didn't get a specific answer. It's not like, he said, oh, we're going to do conditioning twice a week on Thursdays and Fridays and do stretching or yoga the other 5 days. I didn't get that kind of answer. What Daboll did say, though, is they have put an emphasis on it. They have looked at it, with their sports science people, with their training staff, their strength and conditioning staff, and they are taking all that data into consideration. So when they plan the training camp schedule, they get done what they need to get done without necessarily wearing these guys down. And I thought that was important because some coaches, especially first-time coaches, they map out their entire off-season training camp and preseason. It's like, we're going to do this, this, and this. We're going to install here. We're going to work on this situation here. Oh, and we're going to do conditioning, after practice. We're going to do sprints. We're going to do this. Dable, from what I can tell, hasn't done that. Now, does he have a rough idea of what he wants to do and how he wants to do it in training camp? I have to believe he does. But he's basically being flexible so as to see, okay, look, this is his first time working with these guys. This is also his first time as a head coach. So what can they tolerate? What does he have to cut back? The Giants, they have about, I want to say 16 players who are wearing red jerseys for injury purposes, not just, the quarterbacks who naturally wear red jerseys or the kickers who naturally wear red jerseys. These are guys that are recovering from some sort of ailment. Now, to be fair, a lot of those guys had injuries that predated Dable. The Sterling Shepards, the Blake Martinezes, the Matt Parrots, the Nick Gates. These guys all got injured before Dable even, was a thought at 1925 Giants Drive. All right. I'm talking more along the lines of, the Kayvon Thibodeaux, who got injured, during the OTAs. I'm talking about guys like the Aaron Robinsons, who I think, has been in a red jersey towards the second half of the OTAs and now is still in a red jersey. Dexter Lawrence was in a red jersey. He has since come out. So I'm talking about injuries that have popped up since Dable has come up as head coach, injuries that are maybe soft tissue or whatnot. Now, to be clear, there's going to be injuries in football. It's a violent game. You can't avoid it. All right. It's like Dable says, you can't buy insurance against it. It's going to happen. But what you can do is you can be smart about what you ask of the players and how much you push them physically and how you structure the rest and recovery period. That's what Dable and his staff are trying to figure out. So far, the injury situation could be a lot worse. Again, if you take away all the guys that are wearing red jerseys for injuries that are rehabbing from off-season surgery or stuff that happened before Dable got in the building, you're really not talking a lot of guys now who have fresh injuries that we're talking about. Obviously some big names like Thibodeaux, for example. That's a big one. Galladay, what's going on with him? If he had a procedure, I don't think he did, but he's been in a red jersey. So that's a plus. Now, where do I think these guys are going to be come training camp? If I had to take a guess, I'm going to say that maybe 3 guys won't be ready for training camp, that the 3 guys will start on PUP. And they're obvious. I think it's going to be Nick Gates, Matt Parrott, and I would not be surprised if Sterling Shepard starts on PUP. I think the rest of the guys in the red jersey should be ready to go. But it's a long way off. Everybody heals differently. And as Dable likes to say, and he told us when we asked about injuries today, he said, look, I'm not going to give you any specifics. I'm going to be vague. And that's fine. That's his prerogative. But every guy heals differently. So Blake Martinez's ACL is going to heal a little differently than say Saquon Barkley's, right? Because of when the injury happened, the procedure that was necessary, the degree of the tear, and so on and so forth. That's why injuries are so hard to kind of predict when a guy's going to come back. So the bottom line with the injury situation and just the whole conditioning and keeping these guys healthy, I do believe that Brian Dable is cognizant of the fact that the injury bug has really, really been pesky when it's come to the Giants organization. And they are looking to address that. They're looking to do what they can while at the same time making sure that they have a competitive football team that isn't dragging by the fourth quarter, especially early in the season when it tends to be warmer. Again, we'll see how it works out. I'm optimistic, like I always tend to be. And hopefully, they know what they're doing. I'm sure they do. I mean, it's got a staff that studies this stuff and they look at the GPS data and all that stuff. So we'll see. if they do indeed know what they're doing. So, all right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Giants podcast. As always, thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. We'll be back tomorrow. I'll have a recap, some thoughts, and so forth from day 2 of the mandatory minicamp. And then again on Friday, I'm hoping to have a live show with the entertainer so that I can answer your questions and talk Giant football with you, because I love doing it. And it's just a lot of fun for me. So until tomorrow, everybody, have a great one. Thanks for tuning in, and talk soon.